Hello, I'm Rebecca Flaherty, and today I want to share a few tips for getting your Procreate palettes into Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop. You probably know you can't open Procreate swatches in Photoshop or Illustrator, and eyedropper colour sampling all 30 colours from a Procreate swatch in Photoshop to add to a group just feels really tedious. So here's a quick way to get an entire Procreate swatch palette into your Photoshop swatches with less clicking around. Take a screenshot of your swatches in Procreate and then crop it so that just your colours are in the image, and then save it to your files. Open the file in Illustrator on your computer and make sure you have no colours showing in your swatches panel down here, and delete any if necessary. Do an image trace with the colour limited to 30 colours. Then you can expand your selection and come down here to this little folder and add all of these colours as a swatch group. You now have all of your colours over here ready to use in Illustrator. If you want to export these to use in Photoshop, you can click on the hamburger menu here and save swatch library as ASE. Choose a file name up here and just double check that you have .ase as the file format, as that's the one you'll need to open in Photoshop. You can ignore this little pop-up here. Then you can go over to Photoshop, open or create a new document, and on your swatches panel click on the hamburger menu and import swatches. Find the one we just saved, and then your colour swatches will be imported over into Photoshop to use. One caveat is that you may find the hex codes ever so slightly off by the time you get the swatch into Photoshop and sample it. You've got this number here compared to the original hex code we had in Photoshop. It's not so much of a difference if we just change this rectangle next to it to the typing in the code from Procreate. You can see it's not so much of a difference, but it is different nonetheless. The reason for this is that we've kind of been playing a game of colour profile playground whispers along the way. First of all, my iPad uses the P3 colour profile to manage screenshots. If we just open the screenshot up here in Finder, you can see down here in the info that it's using the display P3 colour profile to manage those colours, whereas I work in an RGB profile within Procreate and for all of my illustrations. So even if I open this original screenshot in Photoshop and we sample the colours, you'll see the screenshot has different colours to what the colours were in Procreate. And I must admit, I hadn't even considered this or noticed it until I started digging a bit deeper to make this video. Because I use tints, shades and textures in my work, the colour being the tiniest percentage different either way isn't a problem for most of what I do, and I wouldn't notice it. But I wanted to create a quicker way of importing it for people for whom it does matter and they do need the exact colours. So I've come up with this next method for quickly getting the exact colours over into Illustrator and Photoshop in a way that is still quicker than painfully eyedroppering all the colours individually in Photoshop. So exporting a PNG image from your document rather than using a screenshot is the way we're going to do this. So I'm using this template here, which has 30 rectangles on a transparent background. So then I can quickly swatch drop all the colours into these pre-made slots. And then I can airdrop this as a PNG over to my Mac or save it to files. The second weak link in the chain that leads to colour discrepancies is when you do live trace in Illustrator. If two colours are quite similar, it might assign the same colour to both of them or just apply a slightly different shade. As I said, it's only a tiny difference, but if it is going to matter to you, then you won't want to use live trace to do this. Instead, if you place the swatches we made into this Illustrator template, and then I'm just going to bring the PNG down to the bottom layer and have them side by side next to each other like this. Then I'm going to grab the eyedropper tool and I'm going to command click on my black rectangle, and then I can eyedropper the colour next to it. So command click, eyedropper, command click, eyedropper. And you can work your way quickly across all those squares like that, and you'll be sampling the exact same hex code into each of those rectangles. And then once you've done that, you can drag your PNG image down out of the way of the rectangles. Of course, you could do this in Photoshop, which is essentially the same thing, just colour dropping, but it just feels so much more tedious in Photoshop because you have to click on that, come over here, click OK each time, and it's a lot quicker to do that in Illustrator, just having them side by side and doing that command click thing. So let's go back into Illustrator. And we'll just do a quick check just to verify that these are definitely the same colour as we were using in Procreate. So we'll sample this colour and compare it to our screenshot from Procreate, and as you can see, this gives you an accurate colour. So now we're going to select all of those colours, all 30, we're going to add those a new colour group, the same as we did before, and then you can click and export as an ASE swatch file, and then import it into Photoshop just like we did. So there's two ways of quickly adding swatches into Photoshop and Illustrator, either with a screenshot if you don't mind there being slight discrepancies in colour, or this second, slower but still faster than colour sampling in Photoshop way of adding your swatches that way. As I said, I nearly always use the first screenshot method for getting my colours over to Photoshop. It's accurate enough for what I need, but I still wanted to give you the second, albeit slower option for pulling exact colours out. But I think it's still quicker than sampling the colour in Photoshop. And also, if nothing else, just to point out that screenshotting anything on your iPad or your phone and then opening it in Photoshop to sample will give you slightly different colours than you see on screen. And that's a thing to bear in mind if it might matter to you to have the exact same colour. If you found this video useful or interesting, then please consider subscribing. If you have any questions, then please let me know in the comments. And if you want to download the Illustrator template that I use for transferring swatches to and from Procreate, then check out my blog post, which is linked in the description. Have fun, stay creative, and I will see you next time.